Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Balls in Your Face Marketing. Strap yourselves in because I have a feeling we are all in for a wild ride as I try to handle quite possibly the largest pair of Lucille balls this show has ever seen. We're about to find out whether this old hound dog can keep up with the fox, as I got none other than the approachable and hilarious Judi Fox.
Foxy lady, lazy, lazy, lazy.
My height button here. Oh, I couldn't find it. That's so bad. Oh, wait, I got it. Can I hit it?
You can hit it. Oh, there we go.
It's working.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Awesome. That good stuff, Judi.
That was an amazing introduction.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's so nice to meet you in person.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for hounding me to get on the show.
Well, that's what, what you do with a fox, right?
That is what you do with a fox.
That's what you got to set the hounds on the foxes. So, man, Judi, you got a lot of titles here that I'm going through here. So we've got, for 7 years, you've been doing Judi Fox Consulting, which is a mix of resume and job search counseling plus environmental counseling, which I guess explains the beautiful background that you have behind you. Look at that, it's lovely. And then what else we got? We got founder and CEO of Empire Squad. You are a LinkedIn profile and content strategist, social media attention consultant, director, environment manager systems training, auditing at Aegis. Is that how do you pronounce it? Aegis?
Yeah, it's called Aegis.
Aegis,
yeah.
Okay, my apologies.
That's okay. It's a Greek word for shield.
Ooh, there you
go. We'll protect you while we'll protect the environment and we'll protect you. We're basically just protectors.
Outstanding. See, we're only a couple of minutes in and I've already learned something. So we've already provided value to the audience. So in a nutshell, so obviously there's environment, there's some job related stuff, and there's some media communications. It's a pretty mixed bag there. Why don't you tell me a bit about what that's all about, how you got into all of that?
So the first thing I got into was the environmental side of my background, which is just loving clean air and clean water and not screwing up the world in a nutshell. Okay. And so what that looks like for companies that hire me and hire the firms like Aegis is we come in and help you either organize or get all your permits in place to meet all the EPA regulations or state or local regulations. I've worked in Canada, I've worked in Mexico. So a project that I worked on as an example that I love is there was the Portillo Bridge in Vancouver, and they were expanding it and putting more pilings in for the 2010 Olympics. So I got to go up to Vancouver a lot for the Olympics and work on expanding that bridge because there was contaminated soil and sediment underneath the bridge that we had to clean up. So we're about to get a guest visitor.
Oh, who we got here?
Uh-oh, you gonna get on? Okay, go. My little guy is home today.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, don't announce that to everybody. Just go to the bathroom.
Hey, anything can happen. This is
anything can happen.
This is life. Hey, well, I got a couple of little ones. Fortunately, they're at camp right now, so I got no distractions. Okay, so carry on. So that was the first. So we got the environment side of things. So it sounds like on top of doing. Sorry, just so I get it clear. So on top of like helping companies get the permits and be sort of up to par with regulations, I gather that in a way you are also kind of helping companies reduce their environmental footprint.
Yes, that is correct.
Cool.
So you can go get water. You know where the cups are. All right. So yes, I do help companies. I've written sustainability reports for some major brands out there, and I've worked for. I've done audits for like craft stovetop stuffing plants and, making sure, like you said, either the preventative side or the proactive side. So.
Right. Cool. Okay, well, so that in and of itself, I would imagine, could keep somebody quite busy. There's a lot of, environmental concern out there. And yet you managed to hold all these other titles of helping people with their LinkedIn profiles, job searches, resumes, and social media stuff. So tell me a bit about that side of things.
So that all got started mainly when the 2008 crisis happened. So I'm 42 years old. I've been working for 20 years. And when the 2008 crisis hit, I was at the time working as an environmental manager in the building and construction industry. Mm-hmm. So that industry got pretty much decimated.
Gotcha.
And I took a leave of absence as a voluntary leave of absence, which turned into a permanent staff reduction. So, and that was pretty normal for that time period, especially in the construction industry. And I ended up on unemployment. So I'd never experienced that before. Obviously, that was my first job out of college that I had worked at for 10 years. Wow. So it was a shock to me. It was kind of a shock to the system. It was a shock to my income. It was just kind of an overall wake-up call. And that's when I started getting really active on LinkedIn. And I started realizing how it can be used, how you can network, how you can create opportunities. I started getting some side projects that I didn't even realize, how do you do that? It's this is ethereal, like, how do you get a project off of LinkedIn? But it turns out if you just start connecting with people, start chatting, have these kinds of conversations, stuff starts to happen, right? So, and I didn't even necessarily realize, so a couple things folded out of that. Number one, I was able to start doing my own consulting. So I started writing proposals and contracts and doing environmental consulting for companies as an independent consultant, just to make ends meet and to start, how was I going to share what I knew? And then the second thing it started was, I then have a whole shelf full of books about networking and I threw myself full force into the job search. And then that's when I feel like rubber really hit the road for how do you get your resume looking amazing? How do you market and put yourself out there? You're your own brand. So I feel like those things started happening at that time. It was, yes. Okay. This is a great one, isn't it?
No worries here. I mean, what? I think in a ways it sounds like, in a way I think it sounds like one of those things that's kind of fortuitous, like very like in a way, like I think you have a great advantage because look, maybe that happened to you 7 years ago. There's going to be a lot more people in your situation, right? I mean, this is the way the economy is going. Artificial intelligence is going to displace a lot of people. Machines and robots are going to displace a lot of people. So the fact that you kind of have that head start, started to get into that idea of how can I, sell myself, network, find opportunities, create opportunities for myself. Frankly, give now at this point in time, as I'm sure that was a very sort of, as you said, like a shock to the system and very sort of difficult, scary kind of time. But at this point now, you're probably looking at it going, man, I got a head start on everybody else.
Well, I was forced into a situation that most people don't want to be in, right? They don't want to be unemployed. They don't want to have to do their resume all of a sudden. They don't. And so from about 2008, I didn't get another job, like quote unquote job, until 2010. Mm-hmm. So that was a big, and again, I not only survived, I started to thrive.
Right. And
then that's when I realized the entrepreneurial bug that maybe was always in me, it just bit me hard. And I just have that spirit no matter where I go. So I have worked for corporations since then. I've worked independently since then. I've kind of done the gamut. And that's why my profile looks the way that it looks, because I'm talking to somebody right now about holding a training course for how to network and do sales on LinkedIn through direct messages or through how do you connect with people? What do you say? And my biggest tip is not to be right out front all salesy.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about people ask me what space am I in, especially with marketing or with sales. are you B2B? Are you C2B? Are you whatever? And I'm like, I'm H to H. I've always just been H to H, human to human. That's pretty much it. I don't know how to operate any other way.
Right. Well, I mean, okay, so yeah, I mean, there's no question. Like, I mean, you are very comfortable on the platform. The one thing I can see that maybe I can help you with is get a little some logos for you, or some gifts going on all of these.
I know, I love yours. I was looking at yours and I was like, oh, look how cool they are.
What they could do, yes, that's the one thing. But I mean, aside from that, I mean, you are just rocking it. And here's the funny thing. So, you know, like I said, I was speaking with Brian Schulman earlier, the sort of godfather of LinkedIn videos. And we were talking about, you know, as I've often talked about on the show, this new economy of authenticity, right? That at the end of the day, you know, people are buying from real people. And it's probably always been the case that people don't buy from companies. They buy from people who they know, like, and trust. And, you know, so people are able, you know, it's funny, you know, when we're talking about how, you know, when people ask, well, okay, what should I do? What kind of video what can I say on video? What can't I? And I think I saw you give somebody the advice, you know, of, well, you do you, right? And it makes sense because, you know, some of your stuff is just, it's wild, it's crazy, it's fun. It's very fun. But I don't think anybody is like, I think if other people did it, it would seem very forced, right? Because they'd be trying to do something, that's just you, right? You're just sort of quirky and fun and wild and willing to sort of put yourself out there, right?
I think the first time I looked up how to do a split screen and how to do multi images so I could play actors to talk to myself.
Yeah.
Like, who does that? But I'm looking up, her name was Elle and she's on YouTube, and I was like, I love her content. She was always doing split screens. So then I'm Googling how to do a split screen, and that started, I don't know, 2010 maybe. I just loved that kind of stuff, but I never put it online. Oh. This is like now me finally putting myself online. I only started putting myself online more in March of 2018. I've just been doing this stuff without putting anything online.
Well, you know, I mean, and this goes back to a bit of my conversation with Brian. I mean, I think the thing is you know, LinkedIn has only introduced video about a year ago. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people, myself included, you know, kind of just fell into it, or, you know, it just really, like, all of a sudden discovered it changed the platform in so many ways. Because again, I think it was always just a job website. It was a place for your resume. It was just an online resume. There wasn't much more to it. And then now with the introduction of video, I think it's done a couple of things. It's turned it into a growth platform. It's evolved now, and I think a big part of it, again, and the reason why video I think is the big factor of that, is because you get to know people in a much more meaningful way, right? You get to see, you know, that, like, communication is so little of it is the spoken or verbal word. It's so nonverbal, right? It's you know, it's just facial expressions, micro expressions, tone of voice, et cetera, et cetera. So you get to know people. And then I think the other interesting thing about it is that through that, you know, people started to be very, again, authentic and real and allow themselves to be vulnerable. And, you know, unlike, you know, let's say other platforms where, you know, all of a sudden the trolls will just sort of dive in, people were very supportive and constructive and sharing, you know, tips and that sort of thing. So I think it finally gave maybe people like yourself a platform to be you. And you know, I think we're all better for it. We all get a little, you know, there's nothing wrong with a little laugh in the middle of your day. You can't be serious all the time.
Well, I think you can get a lot done through humor and through just having some joy in your life. I think a lot of times I walked into corporate offices and I was just kind of slugging away at my job, and it was kind of, to be honest, a little miserable sometimes. And so that's why I feel like I'm a little bit of a uncaged bird that's like, oh my gosh, finally, like, let's have a little fun while we solve some serious problems, but they're, you know, that you can still have a little bit of fun. But one thing I wanted to say about your AI comment, and when you talk about authenticity, that's why authenticity is a new value currency to combat that. There is no, I mean, that is a number one way that being on video, number one, people can see how authentic you are. They can see if you keep showing up the same way or if you were just full of crap. Or People like to hire and work with people they trust. They like to hire and work with people that are a little bit fun, I think, at least the people hiring me. So
well, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. There's the expression, that everybody uses, sort of find your tribe now.
Yeah.
I've been trying to push back on that and turn it into find your village. And in part, I say it for, again, not that I expect this to catch on, but I mean, really it's because, I think because of the fact that we're going to this sort of gig economy, this freelance economy, that we're sort of moving back to a village economy, right? Like where exactly it's individuals, focusing in on their zone of genius, their strengths, and then helping each other out for whether, because, this, for whatever it is that you hate to do, there's somebody who loves to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And exactly that you can find, and if somebody doesn't, that's the other big thing that why, social media has just completely changed the game. And certainly, like for my industry, certainly in terms of marketing and advertising, it's just a massive game changer. The example that I keep on using, maybe I should start coming up with a new one, right? But it's like if you crocheted some weird kind of funky socks, right? And it only appealed to 1 in 1,000. Well, 20, 30 years ago, you didn't have a business there. You couldn't knock on enough doors. You couldn't make enough phone calls to sell enough. But if you nowadays, with the sort of psychometric data and stuff like that you can do on Facebook, or just, presenting yourself on LinkedIn as your authentic self, you can find out what it is that, okay, so people who do like that 1 in 1,000 also likes Birkenstocks, tie-dye shirts, and XYZ, whatever the case might be. So then you can target those people.
Yeah.
Right. And so really you can't have, you can find your audience. And if people don't appeal to that, they're like, oh, this person's too silly. Well, fine. They're not your audience.
Well, I also think that before, like, LinkedIn did video and everything, like you said, was I didn't necessarily even know quite what people did. And I think they're opening up my eyes to how do they either monetize, or how do they do what they do, or some of the things that people are sharing on the platform. I'm like, this is awesome. And I get that now through some podcasts and through LinkedIn now. Like, I feel like those are my two places, other than, of course, you still can read books and you can still listen to amazing talks on online. But I feel like it's a really easy platform to consume on, which is why I think there's a lot of good content. And you just can clean up your own newsfeed to make it fill what you want. But like you said, you can find your village. I like that.
Thank you. Okay, good. Okay, wow. I got one comment.
Socks.
Sorry?
Your village with crazy socks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, and that was, like I said, like I for sure, that was the case for me, was I fell into this. I had no desire to put myself out there. To be an online person, to have my face out there. I created my agency under another name so that it wasn't Julian Smit Consulting, because I wanted to kind of keep this separation of sort of like the separation of church and state. But ultimately, at the end of the day, again, I think it just realizing where things were going, realizing that there's a lot more freelancers out there, that there are a lot more to come. And having kind of fallen into the show and then seeing what the reaction was to it on LinkedIn. And I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, even the name itself it was all accident. It all started with a slip of tongue. And I was really nervous about it. I was seriously nervous about it. I was just like, oh, geez, and I got kids and now my kids are like, I got big balls. They're saying, like, they love it. Right. So, it is what it is. But you know what? I mean, the funny thing is that it came from a slip of the tongue. That was me. I've always had a tongue-in-cheek sense of humor. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You know what? Then, okay. Then I won't do business with you. That's okay. I'm okay with that.
Well, and I think for so many years we felt like we couldn't do that because we had to fit into these boxes. Yeah. Either a cubicle box, a corporate box, a business box, and we had to keep it separate. And how much messaging for how long has been drilled into us from generations. And it's really hard to break that. And you have to have a little bit of risk tolerance to break it. And it's scary sometimes, because sometimes I even sit here and I'm like, is anyone going to resonate with me? Is it that you have those moments where you're like, you do realize that people are still people and we all still just want to get along, and we still don't want to ostracize, but not everyone can like us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way that I look at it is sort of the evolution of all of this, right? Is that exactly as you said, like we were all sort of told to fit into this box. We were all, educated as like, here is what professionalism looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talk like this, you say like this, you don't reveal these kinds of things. You kind of put your humanity, your personality to the side. And back in my grandparents' days, right? Like it worked. Okay. Right. Like that sort of industrialist model worked where, everybody could kind of go in, the company would typically be loyal to its employees. The employees would be loyal to the company. They would work there. My grandparents, I think, were recruited out of university by a company, and then they worked for like the rest of their lives. And, and as a result of that, I think, that generation then had a bit of brand affinity to those companies, right? There's like, oh, GM, they got a good reputation. But here's what I think is amazing. This is, I'm so happy to see it go in this direction, is that now, right, people don't have that affinity. People aren't like, oh, big corporate conglomerate. Well, then I want to buy. No. They don't want that, especially this millennial generation. They would much rather buy that craft brew than the big name brew. They would much rather, something with personality. And then now the problem is, one is that those companies have sort of commoditized their employees, where it's like, okay, we can bring them in, hire them, fire them. There is no loyalty either way, right? So nobody's loyal to them. That as a result, their reputations, I think, have suffered tremendously, because if you were, went in and felt like you were sort of worked to the bone and then kicked out the door, well, are you going to speak well of them? No. And because of the fact that everyone was fitting into this box, they are characterless.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think the power is moving back to the people.
Back to the people.
Right? Well, I mean, that's the thing, right?
People are still all made up within these companies. And sometimes I look at people within the companies, sometimes buying into the whole thing. I'm looking at them and I'm in a meeting going, can we still just be human to human here? Because I don't know what you're protecting. Mm-hmm. Like, especially when they're trying to protect like 1 day off that you need because you just lost your dog or something emotional. And all of a sudden you feel like this management team above you is like, well, we have to protect the company.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, that's the other big problem, is that exactly, like, companies, once they get to a big size, their mission, their as on deck is now to their stockholders. It's to increase the value of the stock. It's not to produce great shoes or great whatever the product is that they're selling. So again, like, when if so many people are going to be working as freelancers and able to go and find somebody. The other thing about it too, I think, is that everybody that I see out there are constantly teaching themselves or upgrading their skills. I have without a doubt, ever since I left the workforce, the company that I was working at, wasn't giving me any training. I was not expanding my skills. Once I'd been there for a good number of years, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is what I do. And it was just routine. It was boring, to be honest. Nothing changed, and I didn't grow. And all of a sudden now I'm growing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing. And so as a result of that, and same with all of these freelancers, in a way, the quality of service that you get from them is way better. And the other beautiful thing about that is that it's you're not limited. Like a company, let's say, in a local, if it's a local business, they are limited to local talent. Mm-hmm. Right. Whereas now, if it's like, okay, well, who's the best? I need this. Who's the best person in the world? Yeah. Right? Like, and you can find somebody who's really, really good, and it doesn't matter anymore whether they are in your city or country or whatever. It's a question of whether they do a good job.
Well, and especially because of video, you can see somebody from so far away and want to hire them, and they are just incredibly far away from you, but it's okay because you connect, and what's been so amazing about video.
Yeah.
And then what you said about companies, I also feel like they start to feel threatened when it's so interesting because, again, there's a human being above you as a boss or a manager or a VP or higher. They're all still just human beings. So I'm curious why there's maybe a whole training program that I missed or something that you're supposed to get that tells you to protect at all costs everything at all times. So I almost feel like some companies, the individual people above you start to get threatened if you start looking like you're bigger than them, or you're growing, or you're all active on LinkedIn, and everyone's all, well, what are you doing on that platform? And don't you have a job? And I'm like, well, I can still be growing my personal brand, because what if I don't have a job? I've already been through it. Mm-hmm. I can't not go through that again that's why I do what I do. That's why I keep going and keep pushing and keep helping other people, because we don't know when the economy is going to crash again. We don't know when things are going to go up and down in any industry, whether the whole economy does.
Yeah. So, and by the way, though, when an economy does crash, usually the freelancers fare better.
Yeah. Well,
right?
And we've been, like you said, growing our skills. There's pros and cons to being like super niche down or to have some diversity. And I think also the reason why people might look at me and be like, you have an entire background of 20 years of environmental, but I also was laid off. I have a real life story. So it's kind of this like world where I had to do it to feed myself.
Yeah.
When you're forced to do something, it's like rubber hits the road.
That's right.
So I think the only other thing I wanted to say was, now I forgot.
Yeah, maybe we'll come back.
It was so powerful. It was so powerful.
Well, yeah, we were. Well, look, I mean, I think there's a lot. Hopefully, that people are already getting out of this conversation. But I mean, why don't we talk a bit about that? Like, why don't you tell me, some advice that you would give to people? One, I guess companies, how can they reduce their environmental footprint, and then also how, for companies, how can they adjust to this new economy that we're talking about? Because I think they are, if they're not losing people and money, like if they're not losing money and having to let people go, they might be losing people who are finally kind of catching on to what we're saying and saying, I think, what I would say is to what you were saying earlier, right? About, what's the training lesson that you missed? I think what it is I think what it is this is like, people are kind of like, exactly, like they're in their little box, they're earning what they can earn. There's only so much they can't, like when you're in a company, you can't just sort of double your set income in a year, right? Mm-hmm. No one's going to give you a raise that's that big. So you're kind of confined to that level of growth. And I think you almost want, like, fine, if that's how it is for me, right? And I'm working and I'm just sort of, paying my bills and just able to survive on this income. Well, I want that to be the case for everybody else. I don't know.
I think the other thing I saw was there's a negative implication for the word like side hustle, or the other day someone told me, oh, are you moonlighting? Like, what is that? Where did that term come out of nowhere? I was really surprised to hear it. It wasn't anyone in my current, it was just somebody outside of my circle kind of piping in. And I was like, why is that term so negative? And if I want to do gardening on a Sunday, it's like your sock example. I always use like the gardening on a Sunday where I'm out doing stuff in my yard all day. Well, then why did it matter if I spent an entire Sunday online networking and building a side hustle to earn an extra maybe $1,000 a month on top of, let's just pretend that that's what a worker, an employee at a company is doing, and it has nothing to do with their current job. Just like doing environmental dirt by day or doing social media management for a company by night. Does it really matter? Like, no,
not at all. In fact, again, I think if anything, I think it's an advantage. I mean, first of all, like me doing this show, again, I just fell into it. It's not actually that much of an overhead for me, right? Like it's a conversation. I get something out of it because often, I learn something from somebody else. I get to know somebody. and often they have, you know, a unique take on things or some information that you know, I learned something from. It's a you know, half hour to an hour conversation, and then I just throw on an intro and an outro and I post it online. It's not that much effort. You know, I don't think I was saying this too, like, to Brian. I don't think I certainly like referred to my agency, but I don't think I've ever named it. I've never promoted my agency through this show, and the show is only to help people. But at the end of the day, like, do I feel like I get something back from it? Absolutely. Do I get like inbound, you know, networking through it? Yeah, I do. You know, I get something out of it. And the other, you know, thing that's great is exactly like, you know, I've been able to build my life now. You know, the thing that I often talk about is the fact that, you know, back when I was working, my wife and I used to you know, first of all, spend a ton of money on daycare, right? Because like here in Toronto, at least, it is very expensive. And then we would still be rushing, you know, we'd be all stressed of like, oh, geez, you know, I got to get out the door, make sure that we pick up our kids so that we don't pay the penalty, you know, if you're late. Whereas now, you know, I'm working from home. I end my day at 3:30. I go pick up my kids off the bus. I get to spend a little time with them. I cook them dinner, right? And then I do a little work in the evenings. And that actually, having that flexibility is great for me because of the fact that now I have this global network. You know, people, you know, some of the people that I work with are in Auckland and New Zealand and Thailand and Singapore, whatever, right? So completely different, you know, times. So it's helpful to be able to work a little bit in the evenings. So
I agree. You're actually answering the question that you were starting to talk about, which was how can we even just offer, you know, any advice to corporations or companies, big or small, that have kind of gotten that bug that's bit them, that has said it has to be a certain way and it has to look a certain way. Well, I think a huge way to start to attract good talent and to not lose people that have that spirit or just have started to say, why is it this way? They could offer a lot more flexibility with your work schedule, but it doesn't have to be chained to a desk, especially if it's knowledge work. There are times that having meetings and being face-to-face is important, but you can also do these kinds of calls.
That's right.
So,
yeah, and I think
flexibility.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that they have to do, you know, this was, you know, I was having a discussion with Tim Allison the other day. He's the host of Screw the Naysayers.
Yeah.
And he was sort of raising a good point about, you know, that I think the companies have to get back into investing in their employee development. That, you know, when he had joined the workforce, you know, back in the 80s, you know, there was still a bit of that. But by the 90s and certainly by, you know, by 2000, companies stopped paying for, you know, for training and for other things. It was sort of like, you know, they might do it. What he was saying, you know, is they might do it for the one person that they think is going to be the rock star VP in 10 years, and that person gets all the training. And then the 15 other people that got hired when they do, he's saying they're not going to do anything because what do they care? They've got all these people who've gone to university, accumulated all kinds of debt, and are hungry for a job, and they're just going to, you know, assume they're going to hire them in, lose them in 3 years, get 3,000 resumes for it. Well, I don't know that model works for them anymore. They're going to have to turn that around because, you know, I think, you know, people, they're going to see us. They're going to see what we're doing, right? They're going to see
we're not hiding anymore.
Yeah, no, and they're going to see, exactly. And, you know, back to what you were talking about, moonlighting, you know, whatever. For sure, when I started my agency, I thought white labeling was the word that, you know, people were using. And it was kind of a, oh, do I want, you know, oh, I'm embarrassed to tell people, you know, what if they think that's a bad thing? And now I'm like, I white label for companies. I have people, I have freelancers who white label for me. I have freelancers who we white label for each other. It goes back, right? Like this, this is the village economy. This is what I'm saying. Like this is, and again, like I always say that like marketing is the canary in the coal mine, right? It's whatever happens with it. We always are a bit of the head of the game. One, because it's like marketing, you have to be kind of edgy. You have to be like, what's new? What's the latest trend? And then two, you know, it's very reflective of budgets because when companies start to lose, income, you know, the first thing to get cut for some reason is the marketing.
They also seem to like to cut environmental.
Yeah.
I think because they cut marketing, they cut anything they see as not core to the business. So even though we like to think some things are core to the business, like bringing in income, and marketing and business development and all those sales. I don't know. It seems like you shouldn't want to cut it, but, and then I guess environmental gets cut because, I mean, I'm just going to switch back to that a little bit just because it's in my blood, but oh my gosh, like they tend to just say to themselves, well, it's like companies also from a standpoint of thinking about sustainability, it's not just the environment, it's an economic sustainability, it's a social sustainability, it is an environmental sustainability, but it's so much more. So staying around for the long term, companies talk all the time about how to be around for a long time, but I just don't know if they've really embraced that full three-stooled, legged, pronged approach to say you got to take care of all the buckets. You can't just like cut one of them. The stool's going to fall over.
Yeah, and I think again it goes back to, I think, you know, we're not quite there yet, but I do think the power is going back to the people, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I encourage, you know, people like vote with your dollar. I mean, right? Like
and your daughter.
And your daughter. You know, like bring your daughter to the voting. You know,
I do bring my son when I go vote. I want him to see what it's like. I hold him. We do the circle. I'm just random. But...
well, that was random. Yeah, exactly. See, this is what happens.
I was never brought to a voting booth. I know I'm getting into like voting, like our like platform right here, but I just was never brought. So I feel like bringing him is really important to me. So random.
Right. Okay. Well, no. So you know what? You know exactly. Well, this is the thing. Is you know it in a way it's not random, right? What's different is we used to everything was siloed. Everything was siloed within businesses, right? There were all the different departments, and then our lives were siloed. There was your work. Okay, this is my work persona. Okay, this is my family persona. This is my me time. This is whatever, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I mean, certainly that's been my experience, is that I don't see it anymore as, I don't see any distinction. And, you know, it's sort of like the Richard Branson thing. It's like, you know, when, you know, work, life, and play, it's all the same thing to him. And that's the case for me. It's like, I just focus on the things that I love to do. So, you know, when I'm working, I kind of feel like I'm playing. You know,
well, that's why I did a post the other day saying I threw work-life balance out the window because I just couldn't stand the term. It was not that I'm not anti-balance. It's just that there was only two buckets and they always had this visual image of always having to be equal. And it seemed so like separate. Like you said, here's work and I'm doing this and then here's life and life balance. Why can't it just be like life's?
Yeah, just life. Exactly. Well, I mean, you know, I had Fraser Cameron on the show and he had a great point about that. Exactly. That the work-life balance, it implies that you have to take from one in order to give to the other.
Yeah.
And really, like, again, like it's no, like what's, you know, exactly. I can work with my kids if they're here, you know, like, so, you know, in the summer, sometimes
we almost got a cameo from mine.
We almost got a cameo from one, right? Exactly. So, and does that, exactly. And do I think that anybody's going to be like, oh, well, geez, I'm not going to work with her because her kid almost, like, of course, that means it's meaningless. Nobody cares.
Sometimes he has some really good advice. The other day he negotiated, and I love this about working with your children too and showing them your world. And Eric Didier was here. Michaela Alexis was sitting here. We're all sitting around this physical table that I'm at right now. And my son came in, you know, he was involved in the conversation, and he goes, Mom, I think I'm going to negotiate right now. You get to keep all the money you've already earned. I'm going to get everything going forward because whatever it is you guys are working on sounds amazing. Like, he was an early investor and a doctor, and I'm like, are you like a venture capitalist here? Like,
yeah. Have you been reading Art of the Deal? What's going on here?
He's 6 and he's negotiating for all my future earnings.
Well, look, okay, first of all, I mean, smart kid. You know, but you know what? You know, it's an interesting point. You know, and again, I'm glad that it went this way. You know,
I do too. I love it.
I think it. You know, because I think what we are ultimately exactly being way better examples for our children in a couple of ways. One, they get to see what work is like, right? And I think we are providing a much better, like, when I compare what my life was, again, coming home all stressed, you know, like wound up. My kids have no idea what I do during the day. And now by doing the things that I love, focusing on the things that I love, finding other freelancers who do the things that I don't like to do, I'm way more fulfilled. And I'm sure, and it serves as an example to my children about the value of pursuing what drives you, pursuing the things that you love.
Well, and then you're happier and you're able to share that. It has a ripple effect into the rest of the world and into the rest of the life. And I feel like I can't give up happiness anymore.
Yeah.
And I did experience that shift myself, because I was also in a situation where, again, it was just the grind.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt like a grind. It felt like there were moments that were just so ridiculous in a way that I just was like, what in the world? Why? Okay. So, but then on the flip side, now I have my son looking at me, and he even said the other day, he was like, because I was sending him off to a summer camp for the day, and he goes, why do I have to go to summer camp? You get to go to work and it's fun. I don't want to go to summer camp. He was like, summer camp, I want to stay home with you and do work. Can I do work with you? Because it's a lot more fun.
Wow, nice.
I do have him do some of the video. I have him like hold the vid camera, or I have him help me play out the scene if we're going to do something. He's a lot of fun. I get him involved.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, no. Look, I think it makes for we end up being exactly better parents, better, okay. So we've pretty much well established that, companies, big conglomerates are going to have a lot of trouble competing with us, freelancers and independents. Tell me what you think, but where are we going with let's go back to the environment briefly. Like, where are we going with that? I hear all kinds of really cool, developments, technological developments with that. Like I'm hearing about, I saw this student who had managed to figure out a way to extract carbon out of the air.
Wow.
Which I think, is going to be amazing. What else? What else is going to happen? What do you think's around the corner?
Wow, I don't know. Let's see. I think with even just linking it back to our conversation with independence and with people kind of pushing and being just more driven for innovation, there is going to be more innovation happening. And I think one of the things I saw was even capturing wind energy from cars driving on the highway. Yeah. Like, I think we should capture energy flow in any way that we can. And that's huge.
Yeah.
And then of course, any innovations we have with batteries is going to blow everything wide open.
Yeah.
To be able to store energy. So, I mean, there's just so much disruption that I think that is potentially right on the edge of happening. And I think, again, the more kind of freelance, independent, kind of thinking outside the box and not having to sit in a box, you can get more creative when you actually step outside your world and check out other worlds.
Yeah.
Check out how another industry works. Because if you just stay in your own industry, in your own lane, in some ways we say stay in your own lane, right? But that's different than saying, I need to get creative ideas for content. It works for everything. Right. You have to kind of check out and consume, and then you can create innovative ideas. I just hope for the earth and for our world that we live in, that we just have more and more people say, okay, we can't, short-term gains and profits, and like you said, the stock market cannot be at the expense of the environment. And I think to link an environmental type of concept into our stock market would just be amazing. But that's me just being like, I don't see how those aren't linked. Mm-hmm. If we destroy the environment we live in, how are any of us going to drink clean water and breathe clean air? And then what's the point? Like, we're just living in filth.
Well, I mean, again, I think if we move more towards this gig economy, and the numbers that the predictions that I've seen have been very varied. Like, but on the low end, by 2020, they said like 34% is going to be freelance. On the high end, I've seen 50%.
Okay.
Well, I mean, again, like what you and I are experiencing in doing that, again, is that, okay, well, we're happier, and we think a lot more in terms of, okay, well, what is the full lifestyle, that I want to live in, exactly. Instead of like segmenting, instead of siloing all these different components, it's all the same thing. And for sure, I think, when you talk to most people will say, boy, when I'm out in, out up north in the woods, or when I go to a cottage, or when I'm outside in my garden, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, the demand in theory is going to go up for that. And then again, I have a feeling like exactly like you said, like there's just so many innovations. And exactly like, exactly battery storage power is going to grow higher. Computing, computers are just going to keep on getting smaller and faster. Certainly, solar cells have gotten more and more efficient. It just goes on and on and on. So I do think we're certainly, once we kind of really figure out how to replicate sort of photosynthesis or something like that, then we're going to be really, really in the money. But okay, and then on the other side of the stuff that you do, what are some tips and advice that you would give to people for their LinkedIn profiles, and for video and media creation? What are some tips that you would give people?
I think the first thing I give tips on is, like you said, you've seen me already give it, which is be yourself, because if you try to show up in a way, LinkedIn sniffs that out pretty fast.
Yeah.
I feel like the entire ecosystem of LinkedIn will kind of boot you out if you're if you show up in a way that's really, really poorly managed, let's just say. And you, like, say for example, you're always pulling content that's like viral content from YouTube, and you strip it and then post it as your own. I don't know if you see people doing that a lot, but
I do see it. But again, and yeah, when people do it, if that's all that they do, then, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's not. I don't think there's anything wrong for sure about, if you come across some article that really like appeals to you and you share it, like that's fine too.
That's different. I think we can kind of sniff out the difference when people do stuff like that. So,
Right.
And I think the next thing is not to worry so much about perfection and having it all looking amazing and looking beautiful. I took my very first video in the car. I was not driving, but I felt comfortable. And I think being on video is all about feeling comfortable with yourself. Like, are you able to do a FaceTime call with somebody and talk to your phone, or do some type of video conferencing? Play around with those things and get on video that way if that makes you feel more comfortable talking to another person. I've seen people do their first videos, especially like we just mentioned with Brian Schulman. He does a lot of videos where people get on video the first time and they're in the video with him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really great to kind of break that fear barrier of being on video. And then I also do give permission to people and say, maybe you don't have to be on video to make an impact, and you can create amazing content, and you can even share others people's content in a way that's super authentic, super real. And then I work through that with people, because maybe not everyone's meant to be on video, and that's okay.